Hey, welcome back. Thanks for joining me. We are at week 2. We're going to pick up from where we were last week, where they had just finished doing the footing. It's still pretty fast paced, although it slows down towards the end of the week. So let's dive in and start on day 8. So on day 8, they started to put up the shuttering. This is the stuff that we talked about last week. This is half of the paneling. So what they do is they put half the paneling up, and I have some other shots here in a second, and you can see they do the steel work, the iron work in between. So they put this one side up, and they put these little tags into the wall, and then they start to put steel work between it to create a stronger concrete base. So the concrete's pretty strong, but what happens is the steel keeps it together, and basically just stops it kind of moving apart. So say if there was some ground movement, it kind of keeps it pulled together. It's just a way of making concrete stronger. So that is the first day of shuttering. They got quite a lot done. And then you can see here, we moved on to the second half of the shuttering. So you see in that first part of that shot, they had the iron in the middle, and they put the second half of the shuttering, the second half of the wall on the other side of that. And what happens is those clips that you saw, they tie the two sides together, and then they pour the concrete down the middle. So we're going to move on to the concrete pour. Unfortunately didn't make it to the site to see that, to get some shots of that, but they take a great big arm and they just pour concrete down all the shutters. And that's it pretty much. They pour it down, make sure it goes down to the bottom, and then they will let it set for a day, potentially more, but it's pretty cold here. Interesting thing about concrete actually gets hot or warm when it cures. So fun tidbit. And when they created the Hoover Dam, which is obviously a huge pour of concrete, the issue they had wasn't, say, structural integrity. The issue they had was that because they're building so quickly, the center of the Hoover Dam was going to get so hot that it would break apart, like you can start cooking things in the middle of it. So what they did is they actually ran, I'm assuming it's copper pipes, it might be something else, but they ran pipes of water into the concrete and set it into the concrete, and they would move water through the concrete to cool the concrete down as it's cooling. Obviously here in Colorado, where it's pretty dry and pretty cold in the winter, concrete sets really quickly. And from experience in the basement, I poured some concrete. I was doing my basement, doing some work in my basement, and I was re-pouring some of the slab. You have to add extra water because once you start mixing that stuff, it's basically setting in your bucket. So yeah, they only let it cure for a day, and then they took the shuttering off the next day. So we're going to pick up on day 16, just the end of the week. I'm going to hand it over to myself on the site. So we are here on Saturday today, and they've just wrapped up for the day. They kind of finished off taking off the shuttering over here onto on my left here, this stuff. So I'm going to go through a couple of things. So they've added these little steps in the front here. That's because the concrete steps, this thing in front of me here, is the patio, front porch, whatever you want to call it. Some things to note. See, so the bits with the bolts, that's actually going to be part of the house. It's going to have foundations on it. A top plate which goes into the framing. Basically, the bit at the front here doesn't have bolting in it because they're going to fill this. They're going to fill this in, put dirt in here, and they're going to put a concrete on top of it again to create a big front porch. And the steps there are just to kind of bring out some structural support to hold the slab into the building instead of it like moving off that way. These big straps you see here, these straps get tied to the framing to literally hold the frame onto the foundation. So if you have a strong wind shear, the bolts should hold the building, of course, but the straps are like a really surefire way to make sure it's, if the building's going to blow away, it needs to take the foundation with it. And as you can imagine, once this is buried in the ground, it's going to be very difficult for it to go anywhere. A couple of things to point out here. We were talking about shore void last week. So you can see here the bits of cardboard underneath these piers. So in the corners you have like a pier into the ground, like a bigger bit, and then they have the shore void in between it. And this is it's not structural, so this is a bit that can crush. And you see here has not one in the corner. That's a pier. There's a pier here, one in the corner there, and they kind of all around the property. And the cool thing as well, I've not actually had a house this big before, but I didn't realize this is to add structural support to the side of the foundation wall here because it's so long
as you can imagine, if you've got a lot of dirt pushing on the wall that way, some way to hold it back, you know. It's kind of a bit counterintuitive because technically you're holding it into the dirt instead of something on the other side pushing in that way, but it works either way. All right, so move to the back of the property a bit closer to this this pier here. As you can tell, we are not a walkout property, not a walkout basement based on the way the land obviously goes up at the back of us, so it's pretty hard to do a walkout. But they've done the same thing here on the back, where instead of, this is going to be a large back porch for us, and again, as you can see, the bolts here for the framing, and then this is just going to be filled in with dirt and then a slab on top. And I guess these eventually will be, these little edges will be bolted into the side of the house to, again, hold the slab to the house. So if we're pushing off that way. As you can see, we've had a snowstorm here last weekend, so as you can see, it's pretty muddy and wet down there. So I'm going to guess this will be filled, they'll pour concrete, the slab into there. So but I'm guessing I have to wait for the water to dry out a little bit before they can do that. I'm actually quite impressed they managed to even do as much as they did with how wet it is and the fact that this is even set so quickly. What's quite nice about this, guys, which is a huge improvement over my previous house. So these are metal frames for the windows, for the window wells. Not only are they bigger, which is nice, so you get more light into your basement. These actually, they're thicker for a start, so it's actually a full-size window frame in there. And they're actually bolted, they're poured into the concrete, which is a huge improvement over what normally happens, where they just have, they shutter around a hole, and then they'll just like whack a window in there, and then hope it fits, and then if it doesn't quite fit, they'll chip out some concrete and then put a bunch of caulking around it. This is a much nicer way of doing it, and it also means as long as the frame doesn't get damaged, you can replace your window pretty easily without a huge hassle, because obviously the metal frame is a set size. So this is a real big plus. They don't have to do this. Again, this is a good thing. And also a nice thing about the frame being built in to the concrete. This is good for air sealing as well, because there's as you can see, concrete being air can't really get around the side of that frame because it's poured. This was in the concrete when they poured it. So yeah, we're at the end of week 2, and as you can see, we have a fully formed foundation, at least structural foundation. There's other stuff to go part of it for the slab, but that's it.
Cool. Thanks again for joining me. Really appreciate you coming and checking these videos out. Again, if you like what you're seeing or you want to see some more, you want me to keep going, please leave some comments about what you want to see. And obviously like and subscribe, be part of the actions and see how this goes. It's going to slow down a little bit from here because we had a lot of storms and snow recently, so obviously delays the production schedule. But again, thanks for joining me, and I'll see you in the next one.